There you go.
Alrighty, so hi, this is Courtney Thompson here with Anastasia Ellis and Jennifer Holmes, and we're going to be discussing the effects of social media on the brain and whether or not like high frequency of social media use leads to narcissistic behavior or whether it helps us be able to empathize with others due to like the personal sharing of those personal stories via social media. Okay. uh, so I actually took both quizzes. The first one, which I feel like was maybe based out of the UK, based on the lingo.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, that one was really weird, and I thought that some of the responses and the questions were a bit extreme. Uh, in my personal opinion, like one of the questions when someone ghosts you, which I had no clue what that means. Apparently, that means like you're dating someone and they just disappear and like never contact you again.
Oh,
Like,
when someone ghosts you?
yeah, how you would react to that was one of the questions. So, but anyways, I took both of the quizzes, and both of the quizzes for me said that I'm not like very narcissistic. Like I think one for the first one, it was like you're a caring and empathetic person. You're confident, but you're not very narcissistic. And then I took the other one, and I got a 9 out of 40, and like basically like the higher you scored on this narcissism scale, the more narcissistic you were. That one had more questions to answer, and but I still felt like limited, if that makes sense. So I don't know how accurate. I mean, I don't feel like I'm a very narcissistic person, but I don't know just how the quiz was designed. Like I don't know how accurate that data was. But I did think it was interesting that the second one broke down like the narcissism behaviors into categories like vanity, like power over others, etc.
Yeah,
So
I didn't really see that because my score on that one, I got like 1 out of 40. So I was like, not much to look at the end.
yeah, okay.
But yeah, and I was thinking in that one, like it was clearly narcissistic answer or not. And so
Yeah,
I felt like it wasn't really a good, measure of somebody who's narcissistic because you could easily and very clearly, skew the results, I thought.
yeah, that's true. If you didn't want to come across as like narcissistic, for
Right. Right. It was easy to do. Whereas the other one, they did give you that third option
mm-hmm.
where it was kind of like, okay, so there's kind of sort of a middle ground. And I felt like that was a little bit more accurate because it wasn't so clearly defined in the answers.
That's true.
Yeah, I agree. I took the longer one first, and I got that I'm not very narcissistic. But once again, to both of your to both of your points, I feel that it was you are or you're not. And so, I mean, if you're really talking, I mean, we try to take these things honestly. I mean, it's the same thing as any Facebook personality quiz, but at the same time, you're like, well, but I'm not that extreme. So some of the questions you could be like, well, maybe I sometimes do that, but I don't do it all the time. So then am I or am I not? So let's just go based on how I acted today. So no, I
Yeah. Well,
wasn't.
and then like I think one of the questions was like, do you like taking a leadership role? And I guess my response to that was, does that necessarily mean that you're narcissistic if you like to, I don't know, take the lead in certain situations? So I don't know. I guess some of the questions I don't know,
But
whether I
But
go
once
ahead.
again, you just said it in certain situations. At school,
Yeah.
I might be more comfortable taking a leadership position where, or at work, teaching, I might be more comfortable as opposed to in this regard, maybe not. Maybe in my department I am, but in this school I'm not. So
Mm-hmm.
it really depends on the situation. And when, to your point, that doesn't mean I'm narcissistic. It just means whether or not I'm confident or comfortable in
Mhm.
those situations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt that way too. There was one about manipulating people, and I'm like, I manipulate my students all the time. You know, I don't feel bad about that, but I do feel bad like when I try and do it to my husband. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so I kind of had to like split the difference there on that one.
That being said, though, like I don't think like I think I agreed for the most part with the results. So I don't know.
Yeah. But
I
then
definitely,
I found myself like questioning myself all day long. I'm like, I'm doing this. Does that mean I'm more narcissistic? You know, like
yeah.
every activity I did today, I'm like, would that be narcissistic?
Well, and I was even like super nervous about taking the test initially because I was like, okay, what if it comes back that I'm super, narcissistic? I've just like been completely unaware of it this whole time. So I was nervous, but then I was like, I don't know. I guess I felt like a little happy and validated when I got my results.
Well, once again, what's the difference between being confident and being narcissistic? I mean, really, you're just looking at the same word, just the connotation of the word is different. It's like chef and cook. Well, they kind of do the same thing. It's just
That's
the
true.
the emotional connection you have to it is different. So narcissistic isn't always. I mean, really, how
Yeah, it's
different
not
is it than
bad.
confident?
I
Yeah.
guess I guess like the difference there or the way that I interpret it is like you can be confident and still be like empathetic or aware of like others outside of yourself.
Right.
Whereas I think like narcissism has more of this connotation of you're very like self-absorbed, like kind of just um like not very empathetic or aware of others, if that makes sense.
But that's where the second quiz did a better job because it gave you those three options. That one was narcissistic, one was in the middle ground where you're more empathetic, and then you had the other. Where the other choice, you had two choices. You either were or you weren't.
And like I said, the options were very extreme too. It was either like I always want to be a wallflower or I always want to be the center of attention. Like no middle ground there.
I
But
also found what's interesting is in the first one, if you read some of the comments, it says the people who have found this online test are probably not the representative of the general population. So to me,
well, so
that,
then
and really, how is this any? I mean, is this valid? Then who are you
Right.
comparing to?
no.
Well, it was fun.
Yeah,
And we all feel better about ourselves, right?
to do, but I guess yeah. But I guess to segue into social media, when I found it interesting that reading the art well, I guess first I should ask, have you read the articles yet and watched the videos?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that it was interesting that like in some articles and the videos, there is this argument that yes, high levels of social media use contributes to narcissistic behavior. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, like I think one article, their final like conclusions or results was that people don't really engage in like social media to promote themselves. It's not their primary motivation, but it really is just to stay connected with others.
Yeah, I thought that was strange too. I'm like, 9 pages later, it's
Uh-huh.
like we're kind of disproving our hypothesis here.
Yeah.
The most of the articles and even the videos really focused on Facebook. Specifically, the first article from 2014, it was mainly all about Facebook. And if you talk to my students, I mean, they told me today, they're like, Ms. Ellis, nobody uses Facebook. Nobody.
No.
I'm like, well, excuse me.
That's interesting.
It's an
Are
old
they
thing.
just using like
They're
Instagram and
using
Snapchat?
Instagram or Snapchat.
Snapchat.
And if
Yeah.
you look at how they use those, I would like to see the difference between how they use those versus how they use Facebook. Because a lot of kids nowadays, they kind of have Instagram, but they have a spam Instagram where they can post things that are not probably true to, not something that you would want other people to see. Snapchat, I've seen, for some reason these kids still think that just because it goes away, that it actually goes away. And it doesn't. We had an incident at my school where someone took a screenshot of their Snapchat and then the school, I mean, it was not good for them or for our school. And the point is do these new types of social media platforms, have they created a culture, a society, a population of kids who are not empathetic because they think that they can put whatever out there? So even amongst the social media platforms, they have different purposes with different characteristics with different audiences. And I wonder how much these studies would now change based on that.
That's a great point because as I was reading the Facebook the article that was just on Facebook, Instagram did pop into my head because I don't use Instagram a lot, but that's not really like, you're not narrating anything, but you're taking pictures, right? Of you doing stuff and pictures of yourself. You're taking selfies. It's very like me, because you're taking, and maybe you have some pictures with friends, but it's about your experience, right? So I think that would be interesting to revisit that. Like a few years ago, I volunteered with these kids, and I was really kind of concerned at some of the things that they were saying with regard to Instagram. Like one of the girls was talking about how she had like 1,000 followers or something, most of which she didn't even know. But, and then she was like making fun of this other student because this other student didn't really have a whole lot of followers. And I don't know, to me, I think like that's like narcissistic behavior, right? If you're like, oh, look at all these people that are following my thread, and then like teasing other people because they don't have like this like high like following. But at the same time, like I said, it was kind of concerning because she's saying like she was 13 and she had like 40-year-old men following her on Instagram, and I don't know.
Good learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's how they view it. So maybe they do have a lot of followers, but if they're like, I'm not doing this for the followers, I'm just doing this because I want to share this information with people, and like you said, making fun of other people because they don't have those followers. Well, that seems pretty narcissistic.
And so my students are getting ready they're doing a social media project on a novel that we're reading. So they have to pick a character from the novel and they have to create a social media account from that character's perspective and highlight all that stuff. So we were talking about the different social media platforms, and even yesterday, because Instagram is blocked in the school, I pulled out my phone and I said, well, like, look, what do we post on Instagram? And they're all trying to look at my name. They're like, why do you have your name in your Instagram? You're not supposed to do that. I'm like, but why? I'm not posting anything that I'm ashamed of, or that, if you look at it, I got pictures of my girls, I got pictures of my husband, I got pictures of my food, I got pictures of the beer that I took that I really
maybe, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I was like, plus, if I don't want somebody to see what I have, I don't allow them to follow me. And they're like, but then what's the point of having an Instagram if you don't have followers? I'm like, no, I do have followers. I just don't have people that I don't know. So just in these kids' minds, the disconnect between what does it mean to have followers and what it doesn't, and the purpose behind these social media platforms is just, it just, for me, it was just eye-opening.
Yeah. When you mentioned the name, like for some reason, this concept of a stage name popped into my head. And so maybe that's how they view it. Like they have this sense of like celebrity status, and like this is their stage name, right? This is their persona on Instagram. And so maybe that's why they were just like, why don't you have like a catchy name? Or
which goes with that narcissistic.
Yeah.
Like this is about me. This is a show.
Well, and also it makes it easier for them to say and do things they wouldn't say and do in person because, well, that's my social media persona, that's not who I am.
But Facebook is not really like that. You only see this type of change really on Instagram. I'm not to say that people don't do it on Facebook, but I think more people are less likely to do it on Facebook and more likely to do it on Instagram, where you can change your name, or Snapchat, where it goes away and you create your own name and create your own image or Bitmoji or whatever they call it. I don't know what it is. So once again, the social media, how much you can change it, and all. Didn't we have a lesson a couple weeks ago about our alternate identity? That's
well, and isn't that what Snapchat is? Again, I don't have a Snapchat either, but I'll see people posting like Snapchat images on my Facebook, and they have like these different filters or whatever. So like putting on these different masks, but also in one of those articles, they're talking about like women exhibited more narcissistic behavior around like their profile pictures and like the photos of themselves that they were posting. That got me thinking about like this whole like let me put on a filter and like edit out like my blemishes, and like this concept of perfection, or this obsession with perfection that I think is perpetuated like across these social media platforms too. So I don't know, narcissism again.
Well, and you know, they were talking about kids just want to be famous, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and today it's a lot easier to do because you do have the social media with thousands and millions of followers. And so that, you know, if you want to be famous, you want to be famous for the right thing. And so that's, I can see why they want to have the best profile picture out there because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's just
People have YouTube videos of putting on makeup and they have like 1.1 million followers.
That's
That's
crazy.
narcissism, I feel like. And it's
That's insane. Wow.
maybe I should watch one of those sometime.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's see. What about the empathy piece? What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a fine line because remember a couple years ago when that ALS ice bucket challenge
Oh,
was
yeah.
on?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, even kids, were participating in that, and these kids were able to empathize with these people and then start a good cause and create a good cause. And I feel in some regards like the Parkland students, they have been able to get into media, and other kids have been able, or social media, and kids have been able to empathize with them in a way that if they were just watching the news, they wouldn't be able to get to. So in a way, social media, it makes it feel like it is a real person because you're able to connect to them in real time and see pictures and see their own life events that you normally wouldn't be able to see otherwise. So in a way, I do think it creates empathy. At the same time, if not used correctly, it can be a way to hurt others, which we have seen through cyberbullying and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
once again, you have the two sides where you have the two extremes where yes, it can create empathy, but no, it can also really
Yeah.
hurt people. And we see that in the rise of cyberbullying and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that kids kind of, you know, like you said, there's great big issues that they can totally get on board with, but I think a lot of times they just kind of ignore what's going on. You know, there's so much out there, and if the same person is constantly posting the same type of comments, you know, or the same type of pictures, eventually they're going to just get tired of it and just be like, you know what, I don't care about you, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and not have that empathy and not realize that maybe that's a cry for help, you know.
Or maybe even hide that person, right? Because can't you choose like who you see in your news feed? I don't know why this kind of reminds me of like that filter, like the filter bubble module
Oh,
that we
yeah.
did. If so, yeah, I mean, if you're, I agree, like that if you're selecting to like maybe weed out like those people or those stories, then maybe you're, I don't know, that empathy piece can't be further developed. But at the same time, I guess I'm also the person that's thinking like, okay, why are you? It is a cry for help, but like, why are you putting like all your business, all your drama, and this and that on Facebook or like other social media platforms for everyone to see?
Right.
So,
Right. And then that one article mentioned at the end that they're not narcissistic, they just want to stay connected. And
mm-hmm.
I'm just like, that's kind of, you know, like I rarely post on social media, even though I have a couple of accounts, because I just like to watch and see what everyone else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
People watch revised social
I
media.
do. Like my Instagram, it's like National Geographic. They have like the best pictures. But it's one of those things that's just like, yeah, okay, I can totally understand the being connected part, because that's the whole reason that I've joined social media, is to be connected to the people I live 2,000 miles away from.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I can understand that students would want to do the same thing. You know, they have connections. I mean, I live in an area that's pretty transient. People come from everywhere, and I can understand that. But then you do get the drama of social media in there as well. So you kind of have to, I don't know, you kind of, there's a balance, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I found interesting was they were talking about like, does it diminish like students or people, I guess, in general, their ability to have meaningful face-to-face communication interactions, which is still valuable in the workplace, and that skill is needed. And one thing that I've noticed several times, I've always thought was really weird, is I've been out before and seen like groups of students or kids, young people together that obviously went out together, but they're staring at their phone. Like they're not conversing with each other or communicating with each other. And I don't know, I'm kind of sitting there like, are they texting each other even though they're right there? Are they on social media? Like, what are they doing? They're sitting in this group around each other, but they're not looking and communicating.
I also wonder if because they're always connected, that because they're always sending snaps to each other or Instagram posts or Facebook posts or whatever, or tweets, whatever it is, that because they're all so connected, do they really have things to talk about when they get together if they constantly know what's happening in each other's lives?
That's a good point.
Maybe that's why they're like, maybe they're looking for things to talk about. I don't know.
I was just thinking that.
I just always found it really weird. Like, why are they out together if they're not talking? Because when I was a kid, like when I hung out with my friends, we hung out. We talked,
right.
we rode bikes, we rollerbladed, you know, whatever, but we were interacting with each other.
Yeah. Well, and how many hours did you spend just sitting and talking with your friends, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They spend that time texting.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed in the classroom since, you know, the telephones have become very popular with students, and I kind of saw that shift where they went from being able to work, you know, with interpersonal communication skills to not. And I find I have to teach that a lot more to middle schoolers because they just don't seem to have the same level of skills that they used to, which is fine.
I see that in the high school level too, when I put them in groups and they're like, I don't want to work in groups. I'm like, well, you have no choice. You need to be able to bounce ideas and communicate ideas, even if you don't agree with them. Yeah. And they have a problem with talking and discussing things, and they have a problem agreeing to disagreeing because on Facebook, they're able to say, I disagree, and that'd be the end of it, not really have an actual discussion with a person to go back to that narcissistic point of view. Like, I don't have to listen to your opinions. This is my post. I can delete you. I can block you, you know, whatever.
Exactly.
Or in a personal conversation, you don't have that option. You actually have to hear somebody out. So I see it at the high school level too.
That's a good point. I've noticed that too. I'm student teaching in a 9th grade classroom right now. And the same thing where students were working on this group like PBL, this Mars project. And every time that they would have like a disagreement, they would just stop, like the work would stop, right? And then I had to have a conversation with them. Okay, well, you have to move beyond. You have to come to some consensus. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything done. So like having to have a conversation with them about how to move past that disagreement to be productive, but at the same time with what you're saying, the resistance to work with other students, I started this I've tried doing like this random, so every day they're working with a different group, they're working with a different person, and they're like, Miss, why are you having us do this? Like, we don't understand why we can't just like work with the same people every time, or why we can't work by ourselves. And then I had to have this whole conversation around the value of working with different people, working with different perspectives. And then they're like, oh, okay, you know, I guess I get it. But
I do the same thing in group work. I'm like, you cannot take one piece of paper and then like you can't divide and conquer. You cannot
do the first one, you do the second one.
I was like, you can't do that. You have to actually dialogue and discuss. And if I see you not doing it, then I'm giving a 0 to the whole group. I want to be and engage. And what I do is then I have them put numbers up at the top and I roll the dice, and whatever number I collect, that's the paper I collect, and that's what everybody grades to make sure that they're holding their peers accountable and having a conversation and dialoguing and those type of things. So that way not one person is doing the work. I mean, communication is such an important skill that we need, you know, that we still need to instill. And although if people are communicating more, they're actually communicating less because they don't know how to.
That's how
Right.
I
I was
feel.
just thinking the same thing. I was like, even though they're spending more time communicating, they don't have the skills. So I
Yeah,
guess that's something that
exactly.
we have to incorporate back into the classroom again, is teaching them how to communicate, face to face.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Where are we at on time?
I think that's been, it doesn't say on here, but I think
We're close.
we're close. I think that's it, because 3 people, what are they, 15 to, or 20 to 30 minutes?
20, yeah,
Yep, 20 to 30.
Yeah. And I started this one at 8:40. Maybe we got on about 8:45.
Oh, yeah, then we're good. We're at 20.
Yeah, unless there's anything that anyone else wants to add, like any final thoughts.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to everybody.
Yeah, I'm sorry it was such like a challenge. I was so frustrated. All my other dialogues have been in person. Like I've been really lucky to be able to
Oh.
meet up with people. So that's why I was like, I'm struggling with this.
But
Yeah. I
overall,
haven't actually hosted yet, so.
I think it's really interesting that we started with narcissism and then the effects on social media and how that leads into communication. And I think it comes back to show that all of these things are interconnected and intertwined, and every little thing that we do and say, whether online or in person, is really a reflection of our character.
Definitely.
And it's something that kids really need to understand, how that will help them or hurt them in the future.
Yep.
Right.
Especially when it comes to finding jobs. Employers are looking at social media profiles. So.
Well, and that's the thing that I feel like a lot of schools are kind of skipping out on teaching about the digital footprint, and I think that's key for these kids in the future. Like you were saying, to get a job, their digital footprint's following them, and that's going to be a really big deal.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, thanks for meeting up and bearing with me, ladies.
No problem. Sure. I don't know if when I stop, let me stop recording.